Hello, we'll start in 15 seconds. So welcome to the webinar focusing today on the Olympics. I'm Vlad Spencer. I'm talking to you from near Washington, D.C. Co-moderator Anata Devosian is in Yerevan, Armenia. This webinar is part of the International Sports Programming Initiative of the State Department Sports Diplomacy Division and is produced by World Learning and Digital Communication Network. The legend says that in ancient Greece, during the Olympic Games, all conflicts among the participant city-states were postponed until the Games were finished. This story is true, or it might not be true, but regardless, the myth can hardly have an equivalent these days, since the whole humanity, all teams, all countries, are fighting a common enemy, not willing to either postpone or leave us alone. It's COVID-19. So since our exchange programs are usually, working with the State Department connected to social issues, we thought that this might be a useful topic to discuss and debate. And we have a wonderful panel, as you saw at the beginning. We need to actually be a little bit, more pragmatic, for this one, because we have a couple of people who need to leave, so we'll go to them first. So let me go to Anna first to talk to Karim, and then we'll get back to me.
Yeah, thank you, Vlad. And Karim Soho is our friend. We did with him exchange program in person when everything was good. And now Karim is a head coach of 3-on-3 basketball for France Olympic team. And we are honored that Karim has time now to talk a little bit with us. Karim, welcome to our webinar. And I want to ask you, how was the preparation this tough times in pandemic, and now what's the atmosphere in the team before you leave to Tokyo? Karim?
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. Yes, we are still preparing actually to go to Tokyo. We're in Paris right now. It's the last 10 days, and actually we have to stay 10 days in isolation before we go to Tokyo. And then we will be able to leave on the 16th. It was very challenging. The OQT was canceled once in 2020, and then we had to replay it in 2021, a few months ago, actually a month and a half ago. So it was very challenging to keep the players, to keep everybody online, and especially to try to perform. So now we qualify finally, and we're very excited to have the opportunity. And yes, we are playing the US first in the Olympic Games, so I hope we're going to beat them.
Yeah, well, I wish you a good luck. We'll follow your success, and hopefully you will become a champion. But I want to ask more about what teams you have. How will you be located in Tokyo? Because we want to know some insights from Tokyo. You are not there yet, but I'm sure you have the information.
Yes, we have information. First, it will be very hard to get in the country because it's a lot of paperwork to do. Lately, we have like at least something to fill in every day because it's very challenging. The Japanese government is very demanding regarding the athletes and the coaching staff coming. It's a big issue, and we will be allocated like not too far away from the venue with all the French delegation. And as soon as you play your competition and you're done with it, you have to leave. You cannot go and watch other sports, which is very frustrating. For my first Olympic Games, I wanted to watch some other stuff, but it's a part of playing the game the right way and to be able to have games. Without this, we would not be able to have Olympic Games. So we had to compromise a little bit.
What team you will play in your?
So we will play against the US, against Mongolia, Russia, Romania. Who else is there? China. China is going to be there too. So it's 8 teams. I'm missing some because I'm already focusing my practice, but I'm missing some. but it's very open, and it's going to be very challenging. Italy is there too, and they are the last qualified, so it's going to be very unique. Also, it's all the teams are going to play each other. The 8 teams, the first 2 teams are going to be qualified for the semifinals. The 2 last team will be out, and the rest of the team will play like knockout rounds to be able to advance.
And this is
Perfect.
the first time now, or 3-on-3 basketball, 3-on-3. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the sport. That means,
Yes.
so what does this mean for the sport in general?
It's huge. I mean, I was part of the first ever like national team in France playing in 2012, the first ever world championship. And in 2017, the sport like 3-on-3 basketball became Olympic. So it was pretty big and very short. In a short period of time, the sport became Olympic sport. So it's huge for the sport. So great recognition. And now we have to show like a good show over there to be able to stay in the Olympic program. But I think it will be very good for us.
Yeah. So also, I was about to say this. I cut my introduction short. It's state of emergency in Tokyo. So chances are that tomorrow they'll decide to have the games without spectators. So obviously, sportsmen love audience, love public. So what impact do you think this is going to have on the players?
It can be huge. It's also good because we are going to play Japan, and if you play Japan in Japan, it can be very challenging. And their team is really good. Actually, Japan is also a team that qualified. But for example, we will play in a big arena with 7,500 seats. But if it's empty, it's going to be kind of weird. So I mean, it's also a good way to focus more on your team and what you got to do instead of focusing on the outside and the crowd. So it's. To me, it's not a big problem. It could be a big problem if we were from Japan playing for your own country in front of nobody. It's kind of disappointing.
Yeah. So Karim, thank you so much for being with us. It means good luck with the Olympics. I know that you played the United States first, but we are your friends, so we are subjectives when it comes to this specific game. Please keep us posted. Maybe we'll connect when you are there. Good luck, good health. That means in Japan. And again, thanks a lot for being with us. And we'll send you the recording of this webinar to see. Also with us is Ryan Murphy from the Sports Diplomacy Division of the State Department, and Ryan has meetings after that, which is his form of training for the Olympics. So Ryan, maybe you could want to say a few words at the beginning, not at the end, as we usually do.
Yeah, I feel like if meetings were part of a formal training for the Olympics, then we would certainly all be winning golds right now. I feel like we're all drawn into meetings time and time again. I just wanted to say thank you, obviously, to Vlad and Anna and World Learning for putting on this webinar. It's great to see so many familiar names and faces on here. Thank you to Karim and Arlene and the other panelists for talking about this very obviously timely topic. As Vlad said, the organizing committee just announced today that they will not be allowing any fans. So they have made that decision, and the state of emergency will go through August 22nd, I saw, which is through the end of the games. So it will obviously impact the Olympics, and potentially the Paralympics, which happens soon after that. And it is going to be a totally different games than any of us are used to seeing and watching. But it could present some great opportunities as well. So it's great to hear from this panel to see what their impressions are on what the games will look like and what they're hearing from inside their kind of Olympic circles, and just hear what everyone's opinion is on this, and hopefully get some great questions from the audience. So again, from the U.S. Department of State and the Sports Diplomacy Division, I just want to thank all the panelists for doing this. Unfortunately, I do need to run, but I will be watching the tape later. So it's great to hear all the great discussions going on. So thank you all.
Thank you, Ryan. So by now, 1 year and a half on webinars, probably you're accustomed to Zoom. You know that there's a chat, so we count on the audience to ask questions on the chat, to introduce yourselves, post links that might be relevant. In the middle of the webinar, we'll have our own quiz. So you'll play a little bit the International Olympic Committees and the Japanese organizers to make some decisions, informally, and we'll let you know what the results of the quiz are. But at this point, we are very happy to have all of you here, and definitely very grateful to our speakers. Some of them, Olympic royalty, participants in the Olympic. Others, journalistic royalty. Journalists, involved in covering this in the region, covering this globally. And we have the head of the delegation for Cape Verde in Tokyo with us. So, variety of angles. That being said, thanks for being with us. Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you, Vlad. And I want to introduce you our next speaker, Evelyn Wota. She's a producer at Olympic Channel, member of International Olympic Committee Press Commission from Kenya. Evelyn will join us with the baby. Evelyn, welcome to our webinar. And I'd like to I'll ask you to talk about a little bit about your experience covering the Olympics, and if you are going to do it now in these circumstances with pandemic and how it works.
Thank you for having
Evelyn?
me. Thank you for having me. Certainly, it's a weird games. It feels different. I've covered 3 other Olympic games before, and unfortunately, I'm going to miss this mainly because of the pandemic, because Japan does not allow family members to travel. And I just had a baby recently. In any other time, I saw in London, some of my colleagues traveled with children, and there was a bit daycare. They were able to leave their children, and I'd hoped to have the same for Japan. Probably the delay also messed my plans, and the baby came. But I never imagined that I'd have to be forced to either pick the games or the baby. So it was easy. For me, that is an easy pick. You pick your baby anytime. So that means I'm going to miss because of the pandemic, because they are not allowing us to travel with family members. Only accredited people were allowed to enter into Japan. Obviously, based on previous experience, covering the games has been exciting. It's free. It's time for you to get the vibe of the country when you go to. So if I remember Beijing, that's when I got to see the real Chinese, when they're hosting a big games. And in London, we saw how Londoners put up a very good show. And I don't think, unfortunately, we will be able to see that in Tokyo this time, because most of my colleagues who are going have already received a playbook, which is very, very restrictive. So definitely, it's going to be a different kind of games. And even for most of us as journalists, and just as any other athlete or any other official traveling would want to be, is to try and watch or cover as many sporting events as possible. But this time it will not be that easy, because we have to present some of the disciplines we intend to cover, and then the IOC and the Tokyo Organizing Committee has to see whether there are enough numbers of this, because they're limiting press at some venues. So that means that if I'd intended to cover maybe 5 sporting disciplines in Tokyo, I could only be able to cover 2 on site.
And I want to ask you if there were restrictions also about the how many journalists can travel from the country.
No, there was no restrictions. As long as you're already accredited, there are no cancellations. But there are probably reviews that knocked out so many other journalists. I know for sure that a lot of freelancers withdrew their intentions to cover the games because they could not afford to cover as is. Because normally with the freelancers, it means that you cover the games, and sometimes you don't expense the cost of covering the games to the person you're writing for, the organization you're writing for. So it means you bear the cost of your travel and your stay. That means you try to travel cheap and stay cheap. And in this during these games, you're not able to stay cheap, because most of the hotels, you have a list of hotels where members of the press are expected to stay. And some of them are above budget for most freelancers. Not only freelancers, a lot of media houses in Africa cannot afford to send their journalists and keep them at the hotels that are allocated for the media. So most of them have, unfortunately, they've withdrawn from the games, not because they didn't want to cover, because they cannot afford to cover the games under the current conditions.
How many athletes Kenya has in Olympic Games this year?
The number should be about 200 because they have three team events, actually 4 team events. They had the beach volleyball qualified. So they have the women's volleyball team who are the African champions. And then they have the 7 men, women rugby teams. And then obviously the bulk of the team is always the track and field athletes. Then we have a few taekwondo, a few boxers. Yes, so it's quite a diverse group. And the first batch left Nairobi today for Japan.
Yeah, perfect. That was lots of games to cover. And one last question from me for you is, what was your favorite sport, Olympic sport to cover when it was everything normal?
I think as a Kenyan, you always go for the event where your team wins. And so it's easy for me to say athletics, track and field, because that's where we get the medals. The others, we appear to have been there, but then you really see and know the Kenyans when it comes to middle and long distance running. So that was my favorite and I always enjoyed it. But then I also like boxing very much. And I also I'm always dying to watch the Dream Team with the basketball.
Perfect. Thank you. So thank you for this, and we will ask you questions from the audience later. And I'll move to our next speaker, Arlene Lima. Thank you. She was a Taekwondo gold medalist at Seoul Olympics in 1988. She's from US. Arlene, welcome. And I'm very excited to hear from you insights about by then. How was the Olympics there? How was your experience? You obviously got the gold medal and should be very happy and proud. So we want to hear everything from you. How was it by then?
Well, thank you for having me, and hello to everyone. Yeah, the Olympics, incredible experience, of course, right? But I think even the importance of having Taekwondo in that Olympics in Seoul, the birthplace of our sport, and being the first time that Taekwondo was included in the Olympic Games was just magnified for me personally, the excitement, but also the importance, right? Because USA had to do well, in my opinion, USA had to do well to see our sport grow and be continued and to prosper within the Olympic movement. So US had a lot of pressure on them to have a good performance, and we rose to the occasion. In addition to on a personal level and a personal sport level, we had the world coming together at this Olympic Games for the first time in several Olympics, right? So we had a splinter in Moscow, we had the boycott there, and then we had the reciprocated boycott in Los Angeles in '84. So '88 just was the opportunity with the Olympic family to bring the world together again in the name of sport, which I think that is the overall power that the Olympic Games and the Olympic flame offers the world. That's why it's so important.
Yeah, and now you see the situation here now in Tokyo, and can you compare? I mean, there's no comparison, but how you think the players, the athletes will do now without all this, with all this restriction, without the spectators?
I mean, I think not having spectators, of course, is going to be, it's going to change the energy in the room, of course. But I think every athlete is restricted at the Olympic Games in some form or fashion, right? For example, I competed on the first day of the Olympic Games, so I was restricted from attending the opening ceremonies. Other athletes may be restricted in their eating because they're a weight restricted sport. So I think athletes in general are used to being restricted to reach their goals. I think their focus is going to be on getting onto their competition arena, getting into their arena, getting onto their mat and performing, especially because it's been taken away from them during this pandemic time. So yes, it's going to be a games like no other, but for the athlete, they are going to be laser focused on their goal. And I'm just so happy that they're being given that opportunity.
As we always hear, the most important part of, besides the sports part, it's the social part and the Olympic Village where they interact. I'd like to ask you, how was there for you? Now I know that it will be very different and hard for the players to interact, but we want to know from you, how was that part in Seoul?
Well, I mean, Korea was a beautiful host, especially for an athlete that is participating and successful in their national sport. So I felt very welcomed, even though I beat Korea in the finals. I still felt very welcomed and appreciated. At those Olympic Games, there was a new concept that was introduced, which was an Olympic family village, which is where our families and friends could stay. So I had the Olympic Village, Athlete Village as an experience, but I also was able to have really neat experience where my mom and my dad and my family were staying at the Olympic Family Village. And I knew that they were taken care of, they were having a great time. So that interaction in Korea was beautiful for them, and in turn, of course, beautiful for me. But there's nothing like interacting with, I was a fan of the Olympic Games from a very young age. Olga Korbut and Nadia Comaneci, they just zapped my imagination immediately when I watched them. So being able to be in the Olympic cafeteria and see the gymnasts from Romania sitting there, or the basketball team, or just really awesome. And it does make me sad that may not be experienced at the level that I was able to experience that.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Arlene. Hopefully this will be the last Olympics like this, and we will never have something like this again, and athletes will be able to do all this stuff what you described now. Thank you, and I'll move to our next speaker. Leonardo Cuncha is Chief of Mission at Tokyo Olympics from Cape Verde. Leonardo, welcome. And this is a very good perspective to see, like Karim said, there are lots of paperwork and how you are preparing as a head of delegation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. This is my second Olympics. So I was the chef de mission for Cape Verde on Rio. And it is, for now, it's being a very different experience. Since we had a postponement of the games from 2020-21, deadlines were extended for most of the procedures that the chef de mission has to have. We have a relatively small team. For reference, we are going to have the biggest team so far on the history of the Olympic Committee, and it will be 6 athletes. So it's really small. But the downside is because it is a small NOC as well. Most of the work is done by me or the other person, and actually I'm a volunteer, so I'm not paid staff. I'm doing this on other free time that I have available. So as you can imagine, for these Olympics, we are being demanded a lot of detailed information and procedures associated to entering the games. On my part, I even have difficulty of people in Cape Verde don't speak English, so even French, they have some difficulty. So every document has to be translated, has to be well explained. I have to do most of the procedures that should be the team officials or even the athletes to do. I should support them. So it has been a little bit tiring at some point. But the good side of things is everything is going well. So we are being ready and we are going prepared. The team is really enthusiastic in going to the games because we have been expecting for this for so long, and now we are going to see it happen. I just also received the news there will be any spectators on Tokyo, so it was just now announced. So it will be a totally different game so far. And I'm trying to see how we can cope with these restrictions and get the best possible support for our team to be performing in the Olympics.
Because this is very special, and athletes were waiting for a long time and they were preparing for a long time. Do you give a special assist to them, like you have a psychologist working with them, or how you prepare athletes, mentally for these games?
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question. Since we had postponement of the games, we were able to get some financial support from ANOC, that is the World Associations of Olympic Committees. And with that support, financial support was through the African National Olympic Committee Association. We were able to put up a program that it was called Performance Elite 20. So this program actually was designed to help the national federations on the preparation of their own athletes. And one of the components that this program had was a sports psychologist to support the athletes. But I gotta be honest, some of the athletes that were inserted in this program did not qualify. And some of the athletes that in the end qualified for the games were not included in this program because actually it's very volatile the way that we are going to the games. Some of them were not selected on the qualification pathway basis based on world ranking, but they were selected, for instance, on the tripartite invitation place. So they were invited to go to the games. Or in athletics, if there's someone that is here in track and field should know that road athletics have and swimming as well, as the universality rule, which every country can bring at least one male, one female per sport. Actually, you got 3 spots on universality rule, and these 3 athletes were participating on this program that I just mentioned. But actually, the other ones, none of them were participating because we were expecting other results for qualification as well.
Good, thank you. It's a good insight because we need to know how to prepare. And I wish all your 6 athletes good luck. Hopefully, they will get some medals and make you proud for your hard work.
It would be the first. It would be the first time we would have a medal on the Olympics, so it would be historical.
So hopefully you will.
Thank you very much.
This historic part. Thank you. So our next speaker is Haresh Deol. He's a co-founder and editor at 2213 and professional storyteller from Malaysia. Haresh, welcome to our webinar, and I'd like to hear from you stories from Olympics and when you cover or your experience. Haresh?
Well, Olympics is like a jinx to me. Each time when I'm supposed to go, I never get the opportunity to go. It happened in Brazil, and it's happening right now. So yeah, But having said that, the build up to the Olympics, it's just so different, in 2016 and today, even for the athletes, for the members of the press. And I'm not just talking about Malaysia per se, but I'm talking about the region, Southeast Asia, because there've just been so many things happening of late. The Myanmar have seen the military rule. So they are, facing a different kind of challenge. We in Malaysia are facing quite an interesting political situation at the moment, and that seemed to have taken precedent over the preparation of the athletes. Singapore is not putting any medal target, so to speak, despite the fact that they had Joseph Schooling win the nation's first gold medal. So it's very interesting pockets of different scenarios affecting the not only the athletes but also the press and also the people from this region ahead of the Olympics. So to answer your question, I wish I'd been in Tokyo, but you know, just like Evelyn, I can't. Yeah.
Hopefully you can get next Olympics. It's still on,
Hopefully,
so
hopefully.
hopefully without pandemic and will be better for you third time. I want to ask, what is the most popular Olympic sports in Malaysia?
It has to be badminton.
Okay, so you are
Yeah.
you think that you will get the medals?
Now, I mean, we had a very good chance of trying to achieve the elusive gold medal in Rio, but that did not happen through Dato' Lee Chong Wei. Lee Chong Wei was at one time the world #1 badminton player. But yeah, and before that, you know, he was, you know, the burden, so to speak, was on him to bring back the gold medal. But you know, that didn't happen as well. So this time around, no, the prediction is quite bleak as our economy. So I doubt there'll be any you know, gold medals, so to speak, although we have our cyclist Azizul Hasni Awang. He's done quite well for himself. A podium finish, probably, a goal, hopefully. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I wish
No
good
worries.
luck to your team as well, and hopefully whoever is here will get some medals from our Olympic teams. And
Indeed.
I will move to Vlad for the questions from the audience. Vlad.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, I would like to start with Haresh. Haresh, could you explain to us? You are in the region, you know, so
Yeah.
so obviously we know what the situation is with COVID in Japan. We just got the news that Leonardo was mentioning that it's going to be without an audience. It's a state of emergency in Tokyo. Situation is not good in Malaysia. So, what, you know, could you explain to us a little bit the dynamic of making a decision of having the Olympics, not postponing the Olympics, having the Olympics in a certain, you know, in a certain structure. So what do you know about this context that might be relevant for our audience?
It's quite a very peculiar position to be in, to be honest, Vlad, because you know, at one point sports needs to go on, but the other point, at the other end of the spectrum, is of course public health. And you know, while Japan is pressing the panic button at about 900 or so cases, we in Malaysia, today we had like 8,000 over cases. So we are in a state of emergency at the moment. Indonesia is in a state of emergency at the moment. Thailand has got very strict regulations, and so is in Singapore. So you know, it's all this, and when you have athletes coming from this country entering into Tokyo, now there, of course, obviously there will be concerns by the locals, the Japanese, and then there will also be concerns by the other participating nations as to whether will it be really a safe bubble, or will the bubble burst. Now, this has affected a whole lot of people emotionally and psychologically, because they are afraid. I mean, they want to go to the Olympics, they want to be there, but is it worth the risk? Now, these are among the serious conversations that are being held. I mean, Karim had earlier said that the documentation itself is a good warm-up to the Olympics, you see? So that says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So maybe Evelyn, you could tell us, because you have the kind of a larger picture of this whole thing because of the Olympic channel and your work. So what came into, you know, making this decision, very difficult decision, to actually have it now? You know, on one hand, public health. On the other hand, you know, these athletes, this is the peak of their life in many ways. That means, you know, they've worked for this for such a long time. So describe to us a little bit, you know, the behind the scenes of making this decision, and to what extent you think it is sustainable.
Yeah, I think I'll just add on to what Harish has said. It's quite a different games because, as we know, the bubble does not only begin in Tokyo. Most of these teams have already been in bubbles. Like I know, for instance, the Kenyan teams have been in a bubble for the past 3 weeks. So that means 3 weeks already away from your family, and then another month in Tokyo. So it's a real huge sacrifice in that sense, in every way. And the testing is not really easy on anyone because, it's quite uncomfortable, be it the PCR or antigen testing. And I think when it comes to a pandemic, safety takes priority over everything else. Because even I am the vice president of the International Sports Press Association. We have been calling out and have been very concerned with the restrictions against members of the press. But then as much as we are complaining and shouting and raising concerns, we are also very much aware that the safety of the country overrides our needs as press. So I think what Japan is trying to do first is to secure its citizen. So then we have to just go in and fit in by the rules, because normally we like to go to a country and venture out, see how the city or the residents are enjoying or enjoying the games or watching the games. We will not be able to do this. So we will not be able to tell you whether the Japanese people are happy because we cannot even meet the people on the streets. As members of the press, we are very restricted on where to go. We have a 15-minute rule that if you want to go outside, like if I'm at the athletics venue and I want to go to a restaurant, I can only go for 15 minutes and I have to be back. And it has to be cleared by a security guard. That, it borders almost like it's infringing on media rights, media freedom. But then they have to do this because the safety of the athletes and the games has to go on in the best possible conditions. And these are some of the conditions Japan set aside if the games are to go ahead after the postponement last year.
Yeah, definitely. These games have been a window to that country, to the host country, for many, many years, and something will be lost in translation. I'd like to go to Arlene a little bit. So Arlene, Ryan was asking in the chat a little bit earlier something about your experience in an exchange program we had in Jordan, and when you met the refugee camps and everything. So obviously exchanges are our world, our little Olympics, and but the question goes also to Olympics in Tokyo as well, because either our exchanges, your experience in Jordan and other experiences, or what athletes experienced during previous Olympics, it is about human connection. It is about understanding realities. It's about understanding better the world, bringing people together, solidarity, all these things. What was your experience, during the exchange, during your Olympics? What do you think the experience will be now?
I think there's going to be something lost at a bigger level, but on the athlete to athlete level, we'll still have those experiences. Those athletes will still be able to make those connections with their opponents, with their teammates, with coaches. So I think sport will still find a way for the athlete to have that experience. Of course, the spectator and the extended family of the teammate or the athlete will unfortunately not have that experience. But there is so much value that comes from that exchange. And I was it was just I'm so grateful for the experience that I had in Jordan. The US participated in an exchange with the Jordanian Taekwondo Federation and the Jordanian people, which was, an experience of a lifetime for me, honestly. And the highlight of the trip, although we trained at high levels with Jordan's Olympic gold medalist, Abu Ghash, that was a highlight. But for me, the real highlight of the trip was the day we were able to stay and train at the Azraq refugee camp. That refugee camp hosts a World Taekwondo training site, solidarity site. So this refugee camp, which is home to 36,000 refugees, many of them thrive in Taekwondo training. And I was just so grateful that my sport was offering that there. And then to interact with the young people who were just, given their circumstances, incredibly happy and joyful and enjoying sport. And I it just did something to my heart. And everyone who was involved in our exchange, especially the young people who were involved in our exchange, the 5 athletes that we took, teenagers, their life has changed forever because of that. Just an incredible experience to see the resilience and the joy that was able to be found through sport at the refugee camp.
Yeah, definitely. Leonardo, so you went to previous Olympics. So, for the people who attend these webinars, us included, we don't know maybe, too much about the atmosphere of these Olympics, the Olympic Village and all this stuff. So think about, what you saw on previous occasions in terms of this human connection that is happening there, and what might be missed now and maybe replaced with other types of connections.
Well, I mean, there's a wide spectrum of emotion that you have there, right? Because you're focused, but then you're participating in your country's flag raising ceremony. And that just brings you so much pride and, joy to be a part of that. But then you're interacting, the most simple interactions, just walking to the cafeteria and back, and who you see, or maybe you see another country. I remember for me, witnessing Sierra Leone raise their flag. And here the United States came in polo shirts and jeans for our flag ceremony, but Sierra Leone had these beautiful custom, their customary clothing, and the Chief de Mission for Sierra Leone was just dressed beautifully in this incredible outfit. So those are the type of interactions that unfortunately might be missed during these games. But everything is just, I don't want to sound, corny, but everything is just that awesome in the Olympic Village. Everything is that type of experience. And hopefully there will be some of that for the athletes this year.
Yeah, and our friend Marek was noting here in the chat room that usually Olympics have 50 to 70,000 international local volunteers. And I'm not sure, I'm sure volunteers are going to be present in Japan, but probably not international. So that's a loss. Going to Leonardo a little bit, could you explain, could you describe to us a little bit the Olympic Village experience, which would be changed this time? Leonardo?
The Olympic Village, unfortunately, normally the chef de mission is the person that stays longer on the Olympic Village because he's the first one to arrive or someone of his team, and is the last one to leave. So when everybody is already ready to leave. So we take the most advantage of the experience of the Olympic Village because we stayed the longest time on the delegation. And for me, the Olympic Village, normally it's the place that we can get more opportunities for small NOCs. Because, for instance, and I'll tell you this, we had the inaugural first African Beach Games here in Cape Verde. So it was in 2019. That idea was born on the Olympic Village because our sports minister was the first time we went to Olympic Village and saw, okay, so probably we could invest on making the games in our own country. Also, we had some similar events there in Cape Verde. In 2017, we had the Secretary General seminar for African Olympic committees. Also was the first stone dropped in there. And actually, you have the opportunity to speak to a lot of people and get to know people that normally are behind the emails, are behind the computers, and you can feel warmth. And this happens a lot to us. They become happy to see you because they are speaking years and years with you by phone, email, never connecting. And when we get the chance to be close to each other, it's really, really pleasant. And so we really enjoyed that part. actually the most appreciated experience in the Olympic Games by our athletes and our team actually occurs in the Olympic relations
Yeah.
are lower. So
Yeah, so your sound is not doesn't sound great, but we got the idea. Definitely, the Olympic Village is amazing, tremendous part of this experience, and is going to be reshaped, based on what we know from the previous bubbles, like the NBA bubble or other
Yeah.
bubbles that have been created. It's there. The experience is there, but it's definitely not the same, and people are going to have to find ways to connect. And in relation to that, I have a question after that. But before that, I promised you that we'll have a little quiz for everybody to answer, audience and speaker. So, Laurel, if you are here, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the quiz and get quickly the responses, and then we'll move to the other question.
Sure, we're going to launch a poll just to engage the audience with a couple of questions. Actually, the first two have since changed since we wrote the poll with the new news out of Japan, but we'll just see what you think about it, and then we'll share the results with everyone.
Yeah, you have to play International Olympic Committee now for a little bit. So do you think the Tokyo Olympics should be hosted this year during the COVID-19 pandemic? So let's see. Do you think the Tokyo Olympics should allow international visitors and tourists in the audience? Which new sport you are most excited? The new sport. So I see here only the first sport, skateboarding, on mine, but I could go. So snowboarding, karate, sports climbing, surfing, baseball, and then which country has never participated in the Olympics? This is a quiz, and there are two new sports being added to the Olympic Paralympics. What sports are they? Equestrian, sitting volleyball, wheelchair fencing and powerlifting, canoe and archery, badminton and taekwondo. Okay, so vote, and then we'll get back to Laurel to for the results at the end. It's interesting, what you think about these questions. They are on everybody's mind, and it's interesting what our audience is going to say. Now, getting back to the to our discussion. Also, Marex asked an interesting question. I'd like to go first to our journalists in the panel. So the question was, so no international audience, no domestic audience. Now we just found out during this webinar that Japanese people are not going to be able to see that. So it's going to be a kind of a televised Olympics. So I don't know how many of you watched the Homeland, the series, when they're talking about the revolution being televised. So this is going to be the Olympics being televised. So this is going to be, however, during the pandemic, we all learned to live to some extent in a virtual space. So do you think that social media, in addition to the television, will play a role in actually, maintaining a certain level of interaction, or it's something that, is too far-fetched to be real, to be a true instrument of connection? So let's go to the journalist first. Haresh, what do you think about this?
Social media will definitely play a bigger role this time around. Nevertheless, I believe that whether it's social media, traditional media, or whatever media you call it, you need content. And there's only so much you can do with when you've got limited content. So with the inability of the press going out and meeting people, getting a different take, getting the color stories, the story behind the story at the Olympics, it's going to be pretty challenging and interesting for my fellow colleagues who will be in Tokyo. On the top of your head, you can think of so many things to do in, when you go and cover games, because it's not just about the sport, but what happens around the sport, the whole ecosystem. But today, it's going to be just about, I think, according to the playbook, you have limited time with the athletes as well. So yeah, that's another challenge as well. So it's going to be really challenging and interesting.
So Evelyn, what do you think when your baby is going to be older in college? Will social media dominate our lives? and this might be a starting point for that, replacing interaction at the Olympics, or in-person human interactions are not replaceable anytime soon.
Yeah, true. I think I remember, was it London 2012 is when we realized the power of social media at a large multi-sports event, because most of the trending topics were actually from fans or officials or athletes. So then we realized, because I remember the IOC and all the federations were trying to restrict social media usage amongst the athletes, amongst teams. And then they realized that you cannot control this thing. This thing is bigger than they expected. And so in Rio, we saw what social media and how big it can be. We could not hide. There were some concerns over Rio 2016. As much as probably the press did not cover them, you had the fans bringing them out on social media, or the athletes going out and seeing things and posting them on social media. So I think it is good. It has its bad side, but it's a good thing, because it also helps to spread the games. Like, I know so many people who now wake up and go to social media for their news. That's a bad thing for me as a journalist, because I expect them to come to Olympics.com for their news, for their sporting news. But no, someone will log on to Twitter and type England, Denmark, and get the results. So you cannot control this thing. The best way we can use it is that now we can have the athletes, the volunteers, the fans spreading the goodwill or the good message of the games. So we have many more people outside us, the traditional media, covering the games, also covering the games on their social media handles, which is good because it's free publicity for the games. Media pays so much money just to be the official broadcasters. Then it was very exclusive, but now it's like free for all. But in the long run, it's all about the spirit of the games, to spread it as far and wide as possible.
So I have another question that is directed to the athletes, but let me try something first. So we have with us in the chat room, and I invited her to speak, Lindsay Shoup, who's an Olympic champion, rowing Olympic champion. And I know that it's challenging where she is because there's lots of noise. So we want to try to see if we could hear a few words from her about her Olympic experience and what does she think about, what the Olympic experience is going to be now, considering these conditions. And then we'll go back to questions. So Lindsay, if you could connect with us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and there is no significant noise.
No, there are intermittent pauses, so if you hear the drilling, it is what it is.
Yeah. So welcome, Lindsay, and thanks for being with us. Maybe you could remind people first, your performance, your Olympics presence.
Yes. So my teammates and I won the first Olympic gold medal in rowing for the United States at the 2,000 meter race distance in 2008. And I think it was interesting, Evelyn, exactly what you were saying about social media and the involvement, because I was right in that transition period, right before all the social media was kind of allowed to be opened up, because during my experience, it was requested that we not take pictures, that we not video, that we not, post things on social media. And at the time that was fantastic because it allowed us to stay focused on what was important. And there wasn't the distraction of social media. I think that it also is a helpful thing with this lack of access. I'll also be with NBC as the rowing analyst this year. So all of the different creative things that they're trying to do to share kind of the largest experience possible with people, the most coverage they possibly can. NBC here in the States, they'll be airing the most hours of coverage as they can, which means I'll be up in the middle of the night kind of covering whatever I can. But as far as the experience went from rowing, it is not a traditional sport. So we're used to being in the shadows. We're used to not having people watch us. We're used to being on a quiet lake in the middle of New Jersey and no one has any idea what you're doing. And that's most sports. Some individual athletes have risen through the social media ranks. And so we know a little bit more about more sports than maybe once we did. But I can say, showing up at the venue when you're used to not having anyone around, showing up at your Olympic venue. Let me back it up for a moment. We actually didn't stay in the Olympic Village before we raced. We were even in a hotel by ourselves, so completely isolated. You know, you don't see spectators, you don't see family, you don't see anyone else. And that was in Beijing, you know, without a pandemic to prevent those things. So for as much as the pandemic has shut things down, it's a very similar experience for sports like rowing, and beneficial to the extent that they're allowed to have kind of more of a reason to stay completely isolated and focused. I think that for the athletes that are going into this games, having had the delay year, I remember in Beijing, someone dropped a rumor that we might not go, and my heart sank for a moment and thought, oh, well, that's a joke. Like, that really wouldn't happen, right? You know, and it's happened in the past. So I can only imagine the thoughts that they've had, but you just continue to stay focused and press on, you know, and the fact that it's actually going forward. I know the United States rowing team is in a training camp right now. They just left yesterday. So they're on their way, and the smiles on those athletes' faces, it's just so genuine. Like, they can't believe it's finally here. You know, the fact that they've gone through this delay. Some athletes unfortunately didn't make it because they got sick, you know, and some athletes now will make it because they're old enough, or maybe they were injured last year and now they've had this year to recover. So it's changed who's going to represent each country. But I think at the end of the day, the most important thing, and I wholeheartedly think the games should go forward, is because we don't have enough things that unite us. It's like math and sport are the two things that transcend language and culture. And I think that the more coverage that we can have for these games, the more that they go forward, it brings us together as a global population when we really need it most.
Yeah, definitely. For me, definitely, it was more sports than math. Math was not my
yeah.
But, you know, a question for you, and then we'll go to Arlene with the same question. So obviously, you know, it's 1.5 years of restrictions, and you know, and now you're aware, obviously, being an analyst for NBC, about the way that, you know, the rowing team practice and everything. How did COVID impact their effort? How did they stay focused during these very strange circumstances? And do you think that, you know, the performances at the Olympics will be to some extent affected by, you know, maybe unusual practices,
Yeah.
you know, during COVID, and lack of audience for some sports?
So US rowing, what they did was they had to regiment practice schedules, you know, who could be on the dock and when, and they rowed in singles, which are small boats. So one person per boat, 2 oars each. And that's actually really helpful for the sport because it gives you the most technical feedback possible. And they had a bubble very early on. Like, I mean, they basically said, you know, only these people are allowed in, you know, not even coaches riding in the launches. So rowing is a sport that it makes it kind of easy to stay away from your competitors, away from your teammates, away from your coaches while interacting with them. You know, if you look at a rowing race, you're, you know, boat widths plus oars away from the next. So you can set those launch schedules and things like that. Now, a large portion of the team got sick very early on during the pandemic. So for those athletes that came through illness, you know, there was an article in the New York Times by someone who had been to numerous games. I talked to her while she was actually ill, to go from being in Olympic shape to not being able to, you know, take a few steps, you know, without being, you know, without labored breathing and kind of being made to sit back down is, I can imagine that stark contrast, you know. But to go back to your question about how things changed this year, there were a lot of struggles for a lot of people, but there were also a lot of things that, because of the way that rowing works, they were able to actually go forward very similarly to how they would have otherwise.
Okay. So Lindsay, please stay with us. Now, Arlene, same question. So I know that you are in touch with the Taekwondo community. Is a very together, united, not small actually these days community. So how did they handle the situation?
Well, what's been different is Well, the resident athlete program at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado, it dispersed for a while, but then as things began to open up, they were brought back in, and in a sense, they had their own bubble there, right, with the national coaches. But our sport normally qualifies athletes for the Olympic Games that are kind of spread out, that don't always come from our centralized program. The same thing happened this year. So we have our three-time Olympian Paige McPherson, who's qualified from the Miami area. And then we have one of the resident athletes from Colorado. Now, in a normal year, our team would come together and, do a pre-Olympic camp and train together with the national coaches. And that's not happening this year. So the athletes are staying separate. I'm sure they'll meet up in Tokyo. But that training camp and that built-in shared experience is not happening with Taekwondo this year. And instead of our national coaches coaching Paige, a personal coach will coach her in the Olympic Games. So we're not even kind of mixing athletes under one coaching staff. We're keeping our coaches separate as well. So it is a change.
Yeah, definitely. So Leonardo, same question for you. I know some of your athletes, actually, the swimmers were in the United States, I think. But in general, that means, the members of your delegation, how did they practice? How, what's the morale? How were they impacted by this unusual situation?
It's a funny question because actually it's not in the United States, but she is based and she was practicing some like a comic video addressing this issue.
Leonardo,
And actually, when she does that, the International Judo Federation.
Yeah. Leonardo, I don't know if you can hear me, but your sound
all over.
So probably okay. So probably you cannot continue with Leonardo because the sound level is
I
not.
guess you just lost me.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Leonardo? Yeah, I think it's we have sound problems with him. So Anna, the floor is yours before we go back to our polls and maybe a final question for the panelists.
Yeah, as our usual and our friend Chokomeka is here again, and he's presenting in all our webinars, and he has questions. I would like him to ask his questions. Chokomeka, can you?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, welcome again. It's very nice to see you all the time on our webinar.
Yeah, I'm so very happy to be here today and to listen to all these experiences from the panelists. It's very great experience for me to be on this together. My question, I have a couple of questions out there. The first question I want to ask is to Evelyn herself. I wanted to know from Evelyn, do you think from your perspective as a journalist that nations playing host to Olympic Games sees that as an avenue to announce to the world their dominance in the global stage, not limited to the games? That's my first question to Evelyn. And the other question I have, to Alan, what memories would you always say fascinates you on your first experience at the Olympics as a young athlete, and how old were you then? And then my final question, to anyone can just answer, what does it take to remain focused and staying competitive during the pandemic era, considering the fact that things are not certain and things could drastically change? You might not be availed the opportunity to compete with necessarily the best because of the COVID circumstance. So these are three questions I just want to ask. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Anne and Vlad. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so we'll start with Evelyn. Evelyn, did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. I did. Thank you, Chukwumeka, for the question. I'll just take you back. I don't know if you follow some winter sports. I know we are mainly, being an African, you're mainly a summer Olympic person. But then if you follow like the last but one Winter Olympics, we saw how much Russia tried to be at the top of the world, to try to dominate the Winter Olympics. And that shows you, that just tells you the capabilities and what it means for a country to be at the top of the Olympic medal standings. And as I know, and as you probably know, when it comes to the Olympics, it no longer is a National Olympics Committee or a federation of that national team. It becomes a national issue. We've seen governments allocating millions and millions of dollars for their athletes to compete at the Olympics. Why is this? It's because they want to parade their best, and they also want to be on the medal table. Because once you're there at the top of the world, you could be the USA. But if you're not at the top of the Olympic medal tables, then you don't really feel like the USA. And that's what we saw. Some countries have gone to a very bad extent in terms of, doping. We saw what happened with the Russian team at the Sochi Olympics, but it's because they wanted to be at the top, because it means a lot to be at the top of the Olympic Games for any nation. There's people brag about emerging from wars or building guns, manufacturing guns, everything. But the Olympic Games is the Olympic Games. It's the pinnacle of sport and politics.
Definitely. And I would like, before going back to Anna, to reemphasize this. So I was born in Romania during communism. And during those times, definitely, the Olympic Games were an ideological battle between, the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. And somebody, I think, mentioned a little bit earlier, I think did, Nadia Comaneci, the famous Romanian gymnast. There's a new book in Romania right now, showcasing exactly this. That means, the fact that, this powerful, that amazing gymnast, the powerful symbol, was used for political reasons. And actually her career was impacted, was affected. And eventually she defected to the United States in 1989. So there's lots of geopolitics behind the Olympic Games for good or for bad. That's a clear story, and it did not end with the end of the Cold War, unfortunately. Anna?
Yeah, now Arlene's time to answer on question. Arlene?
Yeah, I think the question was, what was my most memorable experience at the Olympic Games? And I was 23 at the Olympic Games. For me, something incredible happened. It could have been a bit of a nightmare, but for me, it turned out to be incredible. While I was receiving my medal and the flags were being raised, there was a glitch with the technology and my anthem didn't play. And so what happened is there were a lot of US military who were stationed in our military bases in Korea in attendance. And so we just started singing our national anthem. So we actually sang the national anthem a cappella. And then towards the end of our singing, then the music started to play. So just hearing that and sharing that moment with the fans and my family there, and just it created for a once in a lifetime experience. So that was pretty incredible for me.
Beautiful memories, Alan. Thanks a lot for sharing that. Beautiful memories.
Maybe Lindsay, do you have any?
Also, the question on mental toughness. I mean, I think that the athletes that are going to thrive at this time are the athletes who have found a way to keep themselves motivated when, things weren't perfect. I mean, as a coach, even at high level or beginner level, I mean, you have to find a way to find these motivations yourself, right? You cannot always rely on the people around to pick you up. And as a coach, I always told my athletes, it's easy when everything's perfect for you to have a great training. You grow when things are not perfect and you still find a way to have a great training. And I think those athletes who were able to do that over the last 18 months will shine.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think that the athletes that will shine through this, right, are the ones that enjoy the process, that it's about more than the games. It's about life, and when you're doing something that is helping you grow and be better every single day, it's much easier to be like, yeah, I'm going to keep training because I'm getting better, you know. And there are obviously little bumps along the way that have that, but the ones that are fixated on I'm doing this because I want to medal are the ones that might struggle more, you know, because then that's the only reason they're doing it and they don't understand why they're doing it in the first place. And I think that that's a big piece of, you know, sport moving forward, that we need to help everyone who's outside of sport, but also the athletes themselves understand kind of why. Because when you do that, you get a whole lot more out of it. And when that's the case, then you are willing to put a lot more into it. As far as, you know, moments from the games go, there is nothing like having the anthem play, you know, and I remember, I didn't know this at the time, but Bob Costas was the person doing the coverage for the games. And they actually highlighted my teammates and I, because we, you know, we sang the way that we sang the anthem together. You know, I bawled my eyes out through most of it and kind of squeaked out the last few words, and that was it. But it was a moment together there on the podium. And I remember the woman, Anita de France, is someone who's very large in the in the IOC committee. And she's the woman that gave us our medals. She also happens to be a rower. And I remember she, like, we think of her as this emblem, you know, this kind of heroine in sport, let alone rowing, but in sport, in life for women, this heroine. And here she is standing in front of me about to hand me my medal. And she, you know, whispers to me that my life had forever changed. And in that moment, it was like this fairy tale, fairy godmother. It was almost like somebody waved a wand and you could hear the twinkle. And I went from smiling and clapping and, oh my gosh, can you believe this, to just complete jelly. And my legs started to shake and I just started bawling. Rowing was one of 3 sports in Beijing that immediately received their medals. So rather than waiting an afternoon or a night, we literally rowed the boat past the finish line to the dock, get out, sweat soaked, and they hand you your medal in that raw moment. And so you have no time to think about what you'll look like or do your hair. You're just there. And there's nothing more raw and pure than that. And I will never forget that moment. I wrote a book about the whole thing. So it's one of those.
Please post in the chat the name of the book, and I'm sure that maybe would be interested.
Sure.
So let's go now to the poll. So Laurel, so let's see the results of the poll, and then we'll go for one more question before ending. So you could tell us, guide us through what you found out.
Yes, so it looks like we've got our poll results there. Hopefully you can see them. 76% of you all thinks that the Tokyo Olympics should be hosted this year, which looks like it's going to happen. So we're looking forward to that. 76% of you all agree that the Tokyo Olympics should allow international visitors and tourists. So unfortunately, that's looking less likely after the new announcement out of Japan, but we'll see. On the third question, which new sport are you most excited to watch? We have a tie between sport climbing and surfing. And I recognize that baseball is a comeback sport, but excited to have it back in the Olympics this year. But I guess I should have included the 3x3 basketball so we could get some votes in for Kareem and the French team. The fourth question, which country has never participated in the Olympics? 71% of you got it correct. It's Vatican City. They've actually never even registered to participate in the Olympic Games. And then the Barbados, Kosovo, and South Sudan have all competed in the Olympics. And the fifth question, there are 2 new sports being added to the Tokyo 2020 Paralympics, and 53% got it correct. It's badminton and taekwondo. So it's exciting to have those sports added to the Paralympics. The other options, equestrian, volleyball, fencing, powerlifting, canoe, and archery, are already competed in by Paralympians at the Olympics. So thanks for participating.
Perfect. Thank you, Laurel. So one last question. So how, to all the panelists, how do you think that this Olympics will be remembered? And at the same time, if you are the audience, if you are watching the Olympics, what do you think the highlights will be? What should we look for? What should we look at? When faced with this televised Olympics. So more or less kind of a conclusion of what we discussed today with this pretty unusual Olympics that are at the same time exciting because they are the Olympics. So let's start with Haresh.
To answer your question, I think without minus the distractions, whether it's from the stands or whether it's from the side shows, I think people will start appreciating each and every sport, and they will also learn about a new sport. I think this is the perfect opportunity for people to educate themselves with the sports that they're not familiar with. So I think this will be a very good education period if it's tuned in that way, or if it's narrated in that way, of course.
Definitely. Let's see if we could connect again with Leonardo. If you could hear us. Doesn't seem so. So Arlene, kind of the overall conclusion. That means, how are you going to remember these games? What are the highlights?
I'm hopeful that we see this, that we're grateful that we have this opportunity and things are starting to, although amended, have some normalcy. And I hope we're very mindful that this will show us resilience. This will show us excellence, as the Olympic Games always do, but that we're just appreciative. And I hope, I know the athletes will be appreciative for the opportunity to show their skills and compete and hit the incredible moments that we know they're capable of. But as the world watching, I just hope we're grateful. That's what I hope comes out of this, that there's a gratefulness and a remembering that, it could be very different. And we're fortunate that it's not.
Definitely. It's definitely going to bring us together. And there's lots of excitement for the game. It should be. In the middle of the summer, we have this distraction while the virus is still showing signs of strength, unfortunately, worldwide. So let's go to Evelyn. Same questions.
Yeah, I think not all the media will be there. The fans will not be at the stands, but then you know what? The athletes will be there. And I know from the interviews I've done over the past 15 months, the athletes are dying to perform. They're dying to be there. Their dreams were held, were just postponed, and we can't cancel them. And now that they have the chance to perform, they're entertainers. I think we'll see some of the best ever performances in recent times at the Olympic Games. I know that for a fact. Just looking at, if you see the qualifiers or even the track and field, the Diamond Leagues, there have been great performances. We've seen record-breaking performances. That shows you that they're just waiting for the right moment to show us their best. And I think for the world, it's been a bleak 15 months. It's been a trying time for each and every country, whether they tested or whether they didn't. And now, here's a moment for the world to come together and celebrate. Sports is about celebration as well. So this is our moment as a world to come together and celebrate also that we have defeated this pandemic. Because canceling these games would mean that the pandemic has won. So now we are actually celebrating that sport has won. So I cannot wait for the celebrations to start in Tokyo.
Beautifully said, and we all do that. Lindsay?
I can tell you're a journalist. Your words. Thank you for the way that you phrase things. The very short thing that I will say here is that I believe there are 206 National Olympic Committees now, and I think coming from the United States, one of the most important things for people to see is how many countries are involved, how many other people there are out there, how many other cultures there are out there, and that is something that we rarely get the opportunity to see in a positive light. And this is an opportunity, again, like I keep saying, bringing the world together, but just watching an opening ceremony or just watching the different flags that are out there, you recognize how big the world is and how we are more connected than we think.
Definitely. So also Lindsay posted the book better great than never. So please get the book. I'm sure it's fascinating. And thank you so much, Lindsay. And again, I'm very happy that there was no noise around you, that you could actually have you this here. So Leonardo, if you could hear us and say a few words. If not, probably not. So
No, I can. Sorry,
you can.
I
Okay.
was in
So,
mute, and I
yeah.
took my video out because I keep dropping. I know I'm in Africa, so internet not so good.
Perfect. So what do you think?
Sorry, you have to repeat the question. Sorry.
So the question was, how do you think that these Olympics will be, will be staying in memory? That means, so what do you think the highlights will be? So how are you going to, when Evelyn Baby is going to be older, looking back at these Olympics, what is he going to say?
Well, at my point of view, these are going to be one of the most important Olympics of the Olympic movement history. That's because and I've been battling on this. The Olympic movement needs to confirm the benefits to local population and to the world. Why does it exist? So the IOC have been building up a narrative associated with the overcoming of the humanity over this pandemic. And if these games are successful, and we believe they are going to be, and if we can record all these successes for the future, they will be very significant. My concern is that there's a lot of lessons to be learned with this Olympics. So there are several things that we must learn from this and apply it to future endeavors and games, and even take these lessons for the Olympic movement and to the overall development of humanity.
Thank you, Leonardo. So, and emphasizing what Marex just wrote here in the chat, the quote from Evelyn, Tokyo must go on as a symbol that we as a world have won against the pandemic. And obviously this is something that we want to keep with us, keep the excitement for the games and keep the hope that, nothing bad is going to happen in terms of public health, and that these games will be remembered as bringing us together, maybe more than others, because for the first time we have a common enemy, and we have also common hope that is expressed through this Olympics. I want to thank our panelists. Obviously, we hope that Cape Verde is going to get a medal at this Olympics. We hope secretly, because he's not here, that Karim will win the gold medal, even if he plays the United States at the beginning of the games. We hope that Taekwondo is going to reaffirm itself. It's an important game. And rowing, I was born in Romania. Rowing has been big since I was a child. So rowing is something that I loved from the very beginning, and it's a tremendously difficult sport. So good luck to all of you. Thanks to Leonardo, Haresh, Charlene, Karim, Evelyn, and Lindsay for being with us. Thanks to the World Learning team, Anna, Aaron, Laurel, Nicole. Just to remind you that this has been a webinar under the Sports Programming Initiative of the State Department Sports Diplomacy Division, produced by World Learning and Digital Communication Network. We'll see you again. Probably we'll take a little bit of a break now. Probably we'll see you again beginning of September. Maybe the Paralympic Games would be a good topic for at that time, after the games. But in the meantime, we wish you good health. Stay safe. And enjoy the games. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Bye.
But everyone, thanks. Bye-bye. Yeah. Thanks, Vlad. Yeah.